All right, Dr. Stoll, it is your meeting.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Westlake City Schools Board of Education meeting, our regular board meeting for June 30th, 2021. Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Stoll,
Here.
Kraft, Fanouken,
Here.
Lazinski,
Here.
Here not.
Here.
If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And
to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty
for all.
Justice for all.
Okay, next up is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Okay, Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Kraft,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Lazinski,
Yes.
Here not.
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next up, everyone's had a time to review the minutes. We've got to approve the minutes from the special meeting of May 10th, 2021, and the regular meeting of May 24th, 2021. Any comments or changes to the meeting minutes? Hearing none, please say aye for approval.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Okay, minutes are approved. Next item is the school district library tax budget hearing. As many of you may know, the Porter Public Library falls under the jurisdiction of the Westlake City School Boards. And I believe we have Andy Mangles on, and we can go from there. Andy.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on this annual rite of passage where we are required to bring to you our tax budget. And it is worth noting that the tax budget is really just a draft budget that is required by the ORC for us to submit to you before submitting to the County Budget Commission. It is just an estimate of what we think our budget will be in 2022. Later in the year, the library will create a more accurate budget as the projections for revenues of 2022 become more realistic. So with that said, I want to kind of mention some of the things that we're thinking about in 2022 that might affect that. And one of them is the state biennium budget that we are certainly anticipating, as you all know, will be passed hopefully any day now. I think it's required to be passed by today. And one of the things was with library funding, as you can see from the chart that Mr. Hopkins just put up, we only received 23% of our funding from the Public Library Fund, PLF, but that 23% that we get from the state is part of the state budget. We get a percentage. By law, it is 1.66% of the state budget, but the last couple of budgets they've allowed us to have at one point it was 1.7, and we were trying to get it back to that. And in the next budget, it is 1.7 if it passes. If it doesn't, it will be reduced to 1.66. In addition, there are other tax cuts being proposed. So that can have an effect on the amount of funds that we get from the state. We think that even if it isn't everything we hope for, it shouldn't impact our budget significantly. Because we're mostly property tax and the property tax has held well even through the pandemic, we feel confident that in 2022 our budget will be pretty close to what we have presented to you. I think that it is also noteworthy when we think about what we're going to be doing in 2022 that the library, believe it or not, is coming up on our next levy. We, since 1974, have had a levy every 5 years. In 2022, we will have to start the process of going on the ballot in 2023. The Board of Trustees has not really started the discussion about whether that will be another renewal or any other type, but we will need to start in 2022 levy planning. And because the school board, we are a school district library, that will need to be brought before you all to be able to put on the ballot. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind that towards the end of 2022, we will be looking at that. I want to also mention 2022, something that affects us and affects you all. I'm very sad to say that at the end of this year, Jeff Armstrong, who has served a 7-year term on our board, will not be seeking another term. We will be recruiting. We will be notifying you officially in the next couple of weeks. And then for 2022, we will be asking you to approve a new trustee for our library board. Back to the levy, I do want to note that by the time the next one rolls around, we will have gone 15 years without asking the taxpayers for an increase. So I think that that's important. You know, we're hopeful that we might be able to go another 5 years, but that's to be determined. In 2021, I do want to mention something because it does impact you. We've had an interesting year, to say the least, as you all know. But one of the cool things we've been doing is with one of your board members, Mr. Kraft, the Westlake Bay Village Rotary, and the library. We've been planning an art festival that I want to make sure you're aware of on July 31st at the Westlake Elementary School and Porter Public Library. Along with Rotary, we will be throwing a one-day fine arts festival. Dr. Goggin also has been thoroughly involved with that. It's going to be a really awesome event, and it's going to demonstrate the power of partnership between the school, the libraries, and service organizations. Those are the kinds of things that we will continue to pursue in 2022. In 2022, also with this tax budget that you're looking at, what will the kinds of things be funded by that budget? Our current strategic plan has us focusing on 3 primary areas, and that is first and foremost partnerships, continuing to build partnerships in the community, whether it's the Rotary Club, the Farrell Foundation, Connecting for Kids. The library partnering with these organizations to make a better community is first and foremost on our list of things to do. We are also committed to creating makerspace and maker technologies in the library, which I believe if we coordinate with the school district, we can make sure that we are implementing technologies that complement what the school district is doing and allow students from the school to leverage some of that technology. And because we're so close, share different aspects of that maker technology. And lastly, we're engaging in a long-term space planning. Libraries continue to evolve and change, and they will continue to do so. So we are going to look, we have a 77,000 square foot building. We will be looking at how that building should be used in the next few months, as well as the next several years. And that will play into probably some decisions that we have to make on our levy campaign, and will impact not only this budget, but budgets for a couple of years to come. As you can see from our tax budget, we continue to have the budget of around a little over $5 million budget. We continue year in and year out to exceed our expectations on expenses. We keep our expenses under control. A previous board member gave us the best quote ever, and that was Don Mitterholzer, who reminded us to always sharpen our pencil. So we are continually looking at those expenses and making sure that we're being responsible with taxpayer dollars. And the revenue, we were very concerned that we would take a huge hit in 2020, and that just didn't happen. You know, state revenues stayed high, and so our state money was good. So I think you've all had a chance to look at the budget again. Some of those line items will change as we refine it going into the fall, but I think it's a pretty good look at the amount of money that we're talking about, and I just wanted to give you some examples of how we would use that. You know, our personnel expenses continue to be about 70%. And, you know, we're a service-based industry. You know, we have one of the best staffs of any library, or I would contend any business in Northeast Ohio. And so we put a lot of effort into that particular resource. We still continue to spend a lot of money on materials. Our costs on downloadable and electronic continues to grow as more people use it, but those are challenges that we're facing and meeting. In the spirit of your time, I will stop there and see if anybody has any questions about our 2022 tax budget or whatever else might be going on at the library.
Director Mangles, can you show us your handsome face?
Oh. I didn't think anybody wanted to see that.
I have a question.
Yes, Barb.
Okay, did I hear you say that at the end of next year, 2022, you would be on the ballot for a levy?
Well, that's when we will start our planning in the fall of 22. In the fall of 2022 is when we will really start planning and making decisions on what we will need to go to the public with. I would anticipate, as we always do, we would be on the ballot in the spring of 2023. But sometime in between there, we would come to the school board and ask for that process of getting put on the ballot.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
And I think it's important. Library has been on the ballot every 5 years. We've chosen every 5 years. A lot of libraries like to go with that continuing levy. We feel that it's very important every 5 years to go back to the community as a reinforcement that this is what the community wants. It gives them the opportunity to say, yes, it's a very concrete way of getting affirmation that we're on the right track. And last levy, we passed at 81%. Previous levy was 70%, previous 60. So we've been really building a lot of goodwill and trust in the community. And part of that starts with giving them the opportunity to continue to vote.
Okay, any other comments?
If you haven't had an opportunity to the other board members to go over and see the new art walk, the walkway that they put in between the elementary school and the library, it's really quite lovely. And the artwork that's out there right now is really nice.
And it is Westlake students. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate that.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. Next up is the resolution for the Board of Education to approve the Porter Public Library 2022 tax budget. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Any further discussion?
Just thank you for your continued partnership. Thank you for your wonderful presentation this morning as well.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for being so willing to partner with the library. We really cherish that relationship. Thank you.
Okay,
And
everyone's,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Well, I was saying with that concluded business, I will go back to doing library stuff.
Everyone's had a chance to review the tax budget. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Kraft,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Here not,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mangles.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the Superintendent's Report. Dr. Gaga?
Yes, thank you very much. I will go through my report here. I got some items to cover, but we'll do so as quickly as I can. Just want to point out that summer is a busy time for central office. When the school year ends, our central office and a lot of support services, their year really begins. This summer is busier than most. In addition to the traditional summer tasks that we have, we're also focused on helping our students and families move forward after this very unconventional year. One of our challenges has been to blend remediation, enhancement, and the reintegration of our students while having as much fun as possible. It is not lost on us that it is summer. However, we do want to have the opportunity for students to reconnect with each other, maybe catch up on some areas they may have fallen behind, and also provide enhancement activities for other students as well. We have discussed this as a group before, and I just want to remind you that the theme for our summer is unplugged, outdoors, and hands-on. Thank you to Mike Waters for that wonderful motto that really encompasses a lot of the things that we're doing. Like the motto, I do like the motto, but I love the programming that has come from it. We do have Kathy Maxwell on the line here today. I want to thank Kathy, Amanda, Stephanie, Mike, and Paul, and all of those who are working on our summer programs. On this agenda, you're going to find board actions to approve people to work, our extended school year program, which is our typical program, and our extended learning programs. The extended learning programs are listed in tier 1, 2, and 3 on the agenda. So if you look at those, that's what that is covering. A special thank you to our teachers and aides who are willing to come in this summer as well. It is a true testament to our staff that after one of the hardest years in education, we still have staff members who will come in over summer break and work with our students. I do want to point out to our public that our extended learning programs are being funded by the Elementary and Secondary School Education Relief Fund. That is called ESSERS. That will be discussed a lot as we go through these next couple years, but I always want to point out that we are able to provide these opportunities and protect our current budget by, I think, wisely utilizing and utilizing the funds that were provided to us, that we are utilizing that, and we are committing as much of that money as possible towards our students and support for them. Speaking of the ESSERS and being a busy summer, we're also proud to announce that Westlake will be launching a one-to-one initiative for our school next year. Most of those devices have been purchased with the same ESSERS money I mentioned a moment ago, and they are currently in stock at our central office at Hilliard School. Dr. Zagray and his team will be busy getting those devices not only cataloged, but ready for our students to use this fall. I also want to touch base on the Dover campus. Another part of our busy summer is working on our Dover campus. After we met with the city engineer, we reconvened our construction team. Mr. Hopkins will talk a little bit about that. That's what I would expect during his agenda. Well, he does have an agenda item, specifically 5J. Mr. Kosovar is meeting with Mr. Bedell from the Planning Commission tomorrow. The project is moving forward. Based on everything that we are seeing, it will not be completed by the start of the school year. And to start the year, we will go back to the previous traffic pattern that has been in place since 2013. And we're not going to run the same pattern we ran last year. This pattern is very similar. One of the reasons that we would run that previous pattern, the one that ran from 2013 through 2019, is that pattern is very similar. The new pattern is going to be very similar to the one we will run after the construction is completed. The biggest change will not be for the parents who are dropping off. The biggest change will be for our bus drivers, as they will be pulled away from the main entrance and moved to the new lot that would be constructed. Finally, I just want to talk I want to just mention this, and we'll come back to it later. In regard to Bassett and Holly Lane, there's a resolution in the board items that we'll be able to talk about later, and I can address that a little bit later in this meeting when we talk about that resolution. So that is my report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a question, Dr. Goggin. The meeting between Mr. Kosovar and Mr. Bedell, will that at least begin the conversation with regard to the city responsibility when it comes to, say, things like crosswalks, as well as the potential lighting that we had discussed on Bassett? Again, just the conversation, will it involve that conversation?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it's going to cover it. So in order to get on the Planning Commission's agenda, there needs to be a pre-meeting. This is actually a pre-meeting. So this is not officially the pre-meeting. It's sitting down and going through the different plans and looking at it. What it probably will not be in regard to crosswalks. It's probably going to be, one of our concerns is going to be the lighting on the lot and the work that needs to be done to make sure that our new lot is lit, but it's lit in a way that's respectful towards neighbors. So I think it's going to be more of the just an overview of the design and not necessarily getting into crosswalks.
And if it doesn't touch on that, future conversations this summer will address, say, those types of things prior to the school year beginning.
Yes.
Speaking of lighting, I had a resident that backs up to Bassett School. regarding the construction there and continuing lighting the lot back there after the building comes down. So we can talk more about that next week.
Sounds good. And I will talk about when we get to the Bassett resolution, I will talk about some communication that we are pushing out for that.
Perfect.
Okay, any other questions? All right, next item up is Mr. Hopkins with the Treasurer's Report.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. First and foremost, I'd like to thank each of the board members here for the opportunity to meet today. As many of you know, I am, as all of you know, I'm out of town, so I appreciate this opportunity to meet virtually with you and still have this meeting. One of the main reasons that we meet on June 30th each year is the opportunity to do one final appropriation measure for the year. Under state law, in order to remain compliant in our duties as the Board of Education and overseeing the monies, our appropriation measures have to be above or equal to our budgets. And our appropriation measure has to be below or equal to what's called our amended certificate from Cuyahoga County. So as we work through this and as we work through all of our expenditures for the year, I do appreciate the opportunity to meet one last time before the end of our fiscal year here today and vote on a new appropriation measure to finalize the year. So thank you very much for doing that. I'm very blessed with a wonderful staff who has worked very, very hard over the past, over the entire year, but specifically over the past 2 weeks or so as we've looked to close our books, especially a little bit earlier this year because of some timing pieces. They have done an excellent job, and I'm happy to present our appropriations in a minute or two for you as well. And then just as a quick update, the state budget has been approved by the House and Senate, the conference committee. They have picked up the fair school funding from the House version, or the vast majority of the House version of the fair school funding. It seems to have, at this point, kind of a neutral impact on us. There's no significant increase in state revenues that I can see so far, but I'm also hesitant because in Ohio, as a budget process goes through, the governor is given the ability to do what's called line item vetoes. So not necessarily veto the whole budget bill, but he can pick and choose specific items. So as we find out more over the next few hours and days, as the budget does need to be signed at some point today, as we get more details, we'll have more. And I'd like to report a full financial conversation on our July, I believe it's the 12th board meeting that we have coming up, a work session. At that work session, we can go over our finalized spending for fiscal year 21 that we're ending today. And we can also look at that, how the state budget impacts us going into fiscal year 22 and 23, as it's a 2-year budget. If there's any questions on that, I'm happy to answer what I can. If not, I'll go into my resolutions, if that's okay, or my recommendations. All right, hearing none, I'll move into my recommendations. So I do have a handful of them on here today, and I'm going to share the screen if that's okay with you guys. Just so I can see as we go through it. So the first one here, the first two, A and B, I have asking the board to formally establish 2 funds. Both of them are federal funds related to the COVID-19 pandemic over the past year. We have Fund 507, which is our ESSER fund, our Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. This is a sizable fund that we expect over the 3 phases that have been announced. And obviously, they could do something again in the future, but right now there's 3 phases. Phase 1, we have used completely. It was used to help defer any type of temporary layoffs that we might have done during the initial part of the pandemic. So we were able to offset some salaries in phase 1. That was about $330,000. We have phase 2 and phase 3, which the combined between the 2 of them are about $4.8 million. Those have some different requirements on it. We have to use so much for bringing students back up to speed or up to the level where they should be. So that's where Dr. Goggin had talked about some of our summer programming that Mrs. Maxwell and Mrs. Musselman and Mr. Wilson are all taking care of this summer here. So, you know, we're going to see a significant amount of money in that fund over the next, you know, between now and 2 to 3 years out. I do have 510 I'm asking you to approve as well, our coronavirus relief fund. This was about $170,000 that we've already spent. We've actually received full reimbursement for it already. This was for PPE during the first part of this school year that we were in the beginning of the pandemic. The next piece I have is our permanent appropriations. This is again one of the main reasons for meeting here. I hope this opened up this tab on your screen here for you. As you look through this, I know that the print is small, and as people are looking at it on YouTube, this is available on our board docs site, very easy to access and review. Ultimately, what you're going to see is I like putting down our bottom line here, where we had, even in May, we were expecting about $53 million, and we're about $800,000 underneath that. So we're doing well, and part of that is we have been able to move expenses that we've been able to reimburse ourselves essentially from some of those federal funds. So I'm appreciative that we've looked through every opportunity that we can to move expenditures to the federal funds when appropriate, specifically with these coronavirus funds, and that has helped us reduce the burden on general fund. So I'm very pleased to say that we're coming in under that. As we finalize our numbers, remember, this is our finalizing of our expenditures. This is not the finalizing of our revenues. That will happen as we close the books over the next few days. And that's where I'll present that full picture to the board on July 12th. But our appropriations is 2 pages. The first page is all general fund. Again, that's the majority of our focus in the district. This is where we pay salaries, staffing. This is where we provide supplies and materials for students. That's general fund. The second page is all of our other revenue funds. So we have bond retirement, permanent improvement, our building fund that we still have working some finances through. We have food service, all of those types of pieces. So these are all, again, budget numbers, not revenue. And we'll, so I just want to draw attention, but overall, we're looking at about $80 million. Now, just because we've set that as the budget doesn't mean we spent it. So, you know, I will tell you, we set our bond retirement, our appropriation matches what we're allowed through the amended certificate from the county. We only spent about $7 million, but where they take our tax revenue coming in plus what we have in our bond retirement fund, we just have a larger appropriation for it, but it doesn't mean that we spend it. We watch it very closely to make sure. But I am asking the board to approve that overall $80 million in appropriations. Moving on to our next one is we have our temporary appropriations for, the upcoming year. And so our temporary appropriations for fiscal year 2022 is for general fund about $36.6 million. I take 70% of what our permanent appropriations are and use those as our temporary appropriations. Ohio law allows us to operate under temporary appropriations until the end of September or October 1st. So as we work through our finalized budgets with our budget managers, our principals and administrators throughout the district, I will present a formal budget to the Board of Education no later than our regular meeting in September. But I am asking here for temporary appropriations to get started for the year so we can start purchasing what we need to going forward. Same idea with our other funds. We have them listed based on what our amended certificate for next year, fiscal year 22 is. You'll see like all of the grants just get wiped out because we don't know what that carryover and other revenue coming in. So this is a $54 million appropriation. Again, when it's all said and done, I expect to be back around that 80 million for permanent for fiscal year 22, but this is just temporary to get started. Over the next few items here I want to go through, we have our advances, return of advances and transfers. I'll go through each of these individually. Last year at the end of the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, at the end of last school year, we advanced funds into this 009 fund that we specifically were using for IB fees in the high school. It was around, and I can't quite see on my screen with all the people. Let me try to move this. A little over $3,200. I am asking to return that to general fund, and you'll see in a transfer, I need to transfer money into that, but we'll get to that in a second. This year, as we look at each of our funds that I'm asking the board to advance funds to, legally, I can't end any fund, a fund being like general fund 001 or bond retirement fund 002, permanent improvement 003, and so on. I can't end any fund in the negative at the end of the fiscal year. So we advance or transfer funds in order to bring them back to at least a zero balance. Advances are very normal. We do this every year. You'll see here we have a number of advances. In this case, we have a couple funds, Project Link and Food Service, that we're going to have transfers to. I'll talk about that on our next resolution. But I am asking advances for what they have encumbered for the upcoming school year already. So as we have some encumbrances, I am asking the board to advance those encumbrances because those will be bought next school year. As we get into some of the other ones, obviously the very large one here is our ESSER round 2 funds of $800 and some thousand dollars, $824,000. This is to cover what we have encumbered for our ESSER 2 funds. And Dr. Goggin had mentioned a large portion of that is technology as we're looking as we've purchased the technology. In fact, we've received a lot of it, but we haven't been invoiced for it yet, okay, or paid for it yet. But I have that encumbrance. So while the specific law is a little bit gray on whether you have to advance to cover your encumbrances, I like to advance the monies into each of these accounts in order to be at that zero balance. And then next year we can return those advances. Remember, advances are loans. They are not gifts. Transfers are gifts. Moving down to our next one is the transfers. And throughout the school year, I've tried to bring attention to the board that we've had 3 funds that I had significant concerns about. The 3 were Project Link, Food Service, and Athletics. As you'll see, Athletics is not listed. I will give a lot of credit to Mr. Cipollone. He's been very diligent in running his athletic budget, and we have not gone to the point where we entered into the negative for this school year. So he's done a very good job, and I appreciate that, and in a very difficult situation. But our Project Link and our food service programs just unfortunately could not avoid negative cash balances. And so in Project Link, as we look at the Project Link and what happened with Project Link is, as we had to maintain a certain level of staffing, but we had to limit the amount of students who were participating in it. And we've run into the negative. And same thing with food service. We had to maintain our staffing because we were still providing lunches, and we needed to provide a certain amount of staffing because we were doing so many lunches at one time, but they were, in a lot of cases, like the high school, a bag and go lunch. And so while we were reimbursed from the federal government, we weren't seeing nearly the same level of revenue as we weren't able to sell the extras that we've traditionally sold out of our cafeteria programs. So in those 2 cases, I've tried to bring attention to it throughout the school year. This is just an unfortunate part of the pandemic. As a side note, looking back over the past 5 to 10 years, we've never had to do transfers like this to either one of those funds. Both Mr. Waters and Mr. Kosovar, Mr. Waters for Project Link and Mr. Kosovar for food service have run the programs very, very well and have maintained them in the black. Unfortunately, the pandemic changed that for us. So I'm asking for transfers that will bring those back to a zero balance level. I also have listed on here our SHC wellness. This isn't really this is not pandemic related by any means. We're allowed to use some of our funding that we normally would pay to SHC to promote wellness among our employees within the district. This is this year's allocation of a little over $13,000. So whether we paid this to SHC or the board transfers it into a separate fund where we can use it for wellness, the board is paying the same amount of money. But by allowing us to move it into a wellness account, it promotes wellness among our, or is used to promote wellness among our employees. So I'm asking for the transfer there. And then the last one is that IB fees. So as we looked through this, we did that advance last year. And because of some of the uncertainty this year with the IB fees and the pandemic and things of that nature, as we took money in, we were receiving it into a different account. And that's left this one in the negative. So I'm asking the board to just transfer. We were putting the money into general fund. I am asking the board just to transfer that $3,200 into IB to make it a zero account because the money has been brought into just general fund instead. I do have a couple other ones. I'll briefly go through then and now. We have a couple of, or 3 then and nows on there. If you have questions, please let me know. We have our property, fleet, and liability insurance. Mr. Kosovar has been so kind to update this information. This is a slight decrease from last year, but you can see our policy limits that we carry each year. We do it through the Ohio School Plan as a consortium of districts to help keep our costs as contained as possible. And then finally, as Dr. Goggin had mentioned briefly, I do have a resolution. This is a change order going back to one of the, I think it was GMP number 5, where we had engaged Icon Construction for working on the redesign of the front of Dover Elementary. As we got into the school year last year, we moved away from that at that time. And so as the board is fully aware, we're re-engaged again. So we are asking the board to approve a up to $40,000 change order that we can get moving back with Icon for the pre-construction services. This will include the designs of GPD as well as the bidding process, all of that Icon does as well as we move forward. Ultimately, so we could bring a recommendation and a GMP to the Board of Education for changes at the Dover site.
Can
So
you
those are
review H?
I'm sorry?
You review H?
H was the then and nows. I've got 3 then and nows there.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Those are all of my recommendations. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them. And if it's okay with the board, I'm happy to combine 5A through 5J.
Any questions or comments?
Yes, when would you anticipate that they'd begin work on the Dover traffic situation?
So we're trying to work through that as quickly as possible, but there are going to be some hurdles that we're going to have to jump through. Some of the work where we're looking at the front of DIS, removing some of the islands that are in that small supplementary parking lot right in front of DIS. There's some islands, some grass there that we would need to remove. That could be done here, in the next few weeks before school starts. Some of the other work, we are going to have to work through the city and the planning commission before we can break ground on that parking lot at the front there. So that is a process that we're working through. Mr. Kosovar, Dr. Goggin are working with city leaders to try to expedite that as much as possible. But we hope to have ground broken as quickly as possible. And while it may not be ready for the start of the school year, we would expect it to be ready soon thereafter the start of the school year, as soon as possible.
With regard to SHC wellness, I think in the end that is a help to the district and a help to employees, and that'll be something that's ongoing, correct?
So yes and no. Each year SHC votes on whether to continue that or not. They started that a couple of years ago before they were using a wellness company who kind of tried to promote wellness. They found that there wasn't much buy-in with that and districts really wanted to do it on their own.
Right.
We use this for a number of things, whether it may be some incentives, but we even used it this year to help cover the cost of the EMTs at the vaccination clinics that we had for our employees. So, we were able to use some of those funds that way. So It is something I believe it's good. Mr. Mavers helping oversee that as well. And I think it's beneficial to the district, but I can't guarantee that it's ongoing.
Thank you.
Mr. Hopkins, I have a question on item 5I on the insurance for liability, crime and property coverage, et cetera. I see we've got, 5,000, 7,000, or 5 million, 7 million, and 5 million. Are those pretty standard numbers that we would see across many districts? And have those numbers been reviewed recently?
We do review those each year. Mr. Kosovar has been very, very good and has been in, leadership positions with the Ohio School Plan, which is that consortium for insurance purposes.
Okay.
This is standard that we have through the Ohio School Plan. We try to monitor it. In fact, Mr. Kosovar is watching on YouTube right now and just texted me and said, yes, they are the standard plans, and yes, we do review them. So
Very good.
as part of that consortium, we kind of do have a standardized one.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to group treasurer recommendations 5A through 5J. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Here not,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes,
Motion carries. Thank you.
thank you. Next up, Dr. Godden, Superintendent's Recommendations.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Stoll. I'm going to start off with 6A and read the donations that we've received. The Cleveland Foundation donated $5,000 to the Gavin D. Lux Memorial Scholarship Fund at Westlake High School. Gary DeLillo donated $4,000 to the Chad DeLillo Spirit Award Scholarship Fund at Westlake High School. Sally Holscher donated 3 bottles of wine to the basket auction fundraiser for the class of 2022 at Westlake High School. Richard Holland donated $5,000 to the Hallie Reed Holland Memorial Scholarship Fund at Westlake High School. R.S. Renard donated $750 to the Science Olympiad Club at Westlake High School. And Michael Cerna donated $500 to the Frank Sarna Memorial Scholarship Fund at Westlake High School. I'd like to thank all of them for their donations to not only our school district, but the programs that support it. The other items on my agenda are, you're going to notice there are a lot, but they can be grouped pretty easily because they are preparing for next year or also summer programs that we have going. Resolution B is our LPDC, which reviews professional development submitted by staff. Then we have a supplemental contract that was from last year for Amy Schillinger for Dover Intermediate School piano accompanist. And then we have a resolution to approve club and activity supplemental contracts for the 21-22 school year. Letter E are supplemental contracts for the 2021-2022 school year. And then we have an F, the athletic supplemental contracts for next year. And then we have some performance contracts. These are going to be for summer programs and different camps that we have. And when we get H through, I would even say P, we have our different summer programmings and the approvals necessary for it. I had mentioned before that we have our extended learning plan. And when you look at H, I, J, K, and let me see, possibly no, and as we look at those are going to be associated with our extended learning programs. Then we get into the extended school year, which you'll see in M and N. And then we'll have in letter O, some project, actually one person approved there for Project Link and the Camp Link personnel. And then the last one would be to approve for summer transportation. Getting into letter Q, This goes into next year as we are looking at some programs, some department chair responsibilities. And then letter R is resolution to approve employment of licensed staff member. And this is, Judy already works for us, and it's an adjustment to what she's doing for us in regard to speech pathology. Resolution to approve a classified staff member, Jennifer McKinney. She will be coming in and replacing Nikki Grillo at the middle school. And then letter T is a resolution for extended time for our counselors, our psychologists, our nurses, media specialists, and career tech. And those are days outside of the school year that we need them to perform different duties. Letter U is, so we had agreed to contracts, 3-year contracts, or 2-year contracts, with 1 year being, if the treasurer can certify with our OPSI and our teachers union and our WTA. And what we are doing is matching the base increase for our exempt staff. The exempt employees would be central office employees, EMIS coordinator, directors, secretaries, the folks who work in central office. And then letter V is doing the same for administrators, not including myself and Mr. Hopkins. We have a separate contract, but that's what that is requesting approval for. Letter W is a resolution to separate from a staff member from employment. Letter X is a resolution to improve district calendars for 2022-23 and 2023-24 school years. We do like to approve calendars as far out as we reasonably can. And really, our calendar has remained very consistent over the years. When you look at those, you will see that they're very similar to previous calendars that we've had in the past. Letter Y is a resolution to approve and recognize the Council on International Educational Exchange as an approved student exchange program. Letter Z is a resolution to approve a couple overnight trips. One is the Erie Premier preseason boys soccer camp in Gannett University, and actually just one. And the transportation will be provided by the parents, and it shouldn't be a cost to us. Then we actually go into double letters here in AA, and these last two are corrections from previous items that you've approved already. One is to make an adjustment to Bailey Maurice. Her step was originally approved at 2.5, but in actuality, she should be on step 3. And then the last one was for Dan Larocco. When we had the previous item on the agenda, he was listed both as limited contract and continuing contract, which was an error. He should have just been in the continuing contract section. Those are the items that I had for today. As always, I like to keep 6A separate. However, if the board is comfortable in putting letters B, 6B through 6BB together, I would be comfortable with that. But if you'd like any of them pulled out, please feel free to do so.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Goggin. Any questions or comments on any of the items?
I just want to say thank you for having the 2-year calendar. That's something that I've wanted for a long time. It was hard to get, but I do appreciate it. And I think the parents appreciate knowing, you know, the calendar for vacation planning and stuff like that. So I do appreciate the 2 years.
Anything about the calendars that you want to specifically point out that may have been a point of discussion with any employees or administrators?
Not in particular. We went through and we try and balance everything that's there. we look at the different holidays, religious observations, and everything we can to try and take as much into consideration as we possibly can as we build those. It is tricky. You have a window. You don't want to go too early in August, and you don't want to go too late in June, and you want to be able to get the days in which we instruct in between, and to do appropriate holidays in the middle. So it is a balancing act, but overall, we have the majority of our calendars. If you stacked them on top of each other, you'd see that they're very similar annually with just some slight changes. So there's really not, it seems like when you look at it from the surface, you may look at it and say, oh, okay, well, that one was easy. But there is thought and conversations that go into it with our Superintendent Advisory Council, which is made up of our OPSI and our WTA staff, as well as administration. So we appreciate their input as we build those.
The other big concern is testing as we go throughout the year.
Well, that's true too, and we do have our testing windows, and we want to make sure that we manage our breaks around there. And sometimes they even our semester breaks, our quarter breaks, and as we do that, to try and balance those as much as we can. But I think we have a pretty good schedule and a pretty good calendar that we're able to share with folks.
I think about board leadership, and Dr. Stoll, I know that you'll sometimes have those conversations with Dr. Goggin and Mr. Hopkins, and in particular with regard to 6U and V, and anything that you want to add to any of the comments that Dr. Goggin has made.
No, I think we've had a nice agreement between both of the teachers unions, and I think we've come to a nice agreement. It's fiscally conservative, and we appreciate both groups working with us, and it's certainly a change from what we saw several years ago. So we appreciate everyone involved with all of those contract negotiations.
Thanks.
Any other comments?
I have a question on T with the extended time. On the nurses, I'm only seeing 2 listed. I don't remember the new high school nurse. Are they needing additional time also?
Yes, and that's a great point to bring up, Liz, is we do have 3 nurses on staff this past year, and we will continue that into next year. However, the new nurse we brought on through the ESC, so she is actually hired through the ESC and not through the school board. So that's why she's not reflected on there.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to take Superintendent's Recommendations 6A first and separate. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? I would just like to say, as always, we appreciate all of those gifts and donations. It's something that we really look forward to, and we thank all of those generous donors. Roll call, Mr. Hopkins.
Piernat,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next up is Superintendent's Recommendation 6B through 6BB. Okay. Need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I have a question on the transportation for the summer. Will that also be covered by the ESSER fund?
Yes, we are looking to offset those costs through the ESSER funds. That's the intent of much of those funding.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Piernat,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item is 7 board items, and 7A is the second reading of the policies. Dr. Goggin.
Right, we had these policies that were submitted a period of time ago, and we are actually to a point with the second reading and a vote on them. Mostly, sorry, standard policies, we utilize Neola, and these are policies that are either recommended by Neola and their attorneys or mandated through legislation that's already been voted upon.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, next up is item 7B, resolution to approve the board policies. Can I have a motion to approve the policies?
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Kraft,
Yes.
Kurnat,
yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes,
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next up is item 7C, resolution determining to look at the Holly Lane and Bassett Road properties as community assets. Dr. Goggin, do you want to give us a little background?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, this is something, and we've had this conversation prior to, and Mr. Hopkins, I like the way that you have this listed. Oh,
Oh.
could you please share your screen? That was very helpful. So this is something that I know we've talked about publicly in our board meetings, and it seems to be a conversation that keeps coming up, and we were trying to figure out a way to really get our point across, because as we are, so let me go back. When we're looking at taking down Dover Elementary School was one thing. That's on our property. There's obviously schools around us, and it's very obvious that that land is not going to be developed into condominiums or homes or anything like that. However, when we get into our properties such as Bassett Elementary, and then it probably most likely, if the board approves next summer, taking down Holly Lane Elementary School, those are nestled in communities, and there's always a very significant concern from residents that those properties are going to be sold and developed and turned into something that it is not right now. And we have shared that, so you have those people who really feel strongly that it stays field space or school space. And then you have others in the community who are going to say, well, why don't you sell it? Why don't you turn around and sell those, take the money and utilize it for school purposes? And, for both of those groups, we wanted to put something in front of the board for you to consider, and to kind of go through and for us to be able to talk about publicly, so that we can point to and say, look, we were very clear on June 30th, 2021, what our intentions are with this property, with these properties, and to be able to go through that, and also to provide some rationale. So if I can go through this quickly and then allow the board to comment on it, there's a couple of these areas, I'll read it, and then there's a couple areas that I will pause that I want to point out some reasoning behind it. So as it states here, and I appreciate, Mr. Hopkins, the fact that you're scrolling for me, because I do not have control over it. It says, whereas the district has recently consolidated its elementary students into the new elementary school, and whereas the district relocated its administrative offices into the former Hilliard Elementary School, and whereas the district has abated and demolished the former Dover Elementary School and will develop that site to address traffic flow to the middle and intermediate schools, and whereas the district has received many inquiries about plans for former Holly Lane and Bassett Road properties, and whereas the district's residents, including property owners, are concerned about the future development, and whereas the district has contracted for the demolition of Bassett Elementary School, but will be retaining the playground for community use, and whereas the city is approaching is approaching level of development that such large tracts of land will no longer be available should a future district use arise. So I'm going to pause right there for a second, and I'm going to talk about what those first whereas is stated. We're publicly acknowledging what we did. We consolidated our elementary schools to the new elementary school. We have moved our central office into Hilliard Elementary School. We did raise Dover Elementary School, and we, as we discussed earlier, will be utilizing that space to address traffic flow there. And when it comes to those properties, I really like the one that we have in here that it says the city is approaching level of development where large tracts of land are no longer available. That's something that I really believe is, I think, prudent for us to consider as a current administration, a current Board of Education, because this isn't as simple as somebody trying to find, a 3/4 acre piece of property to put a house on. When a school district needs land to either build a building or create fields or do anything that services a large number of students or people, we need large tracts of land. And so let's just say Bassett is 15 acres. I think that's in the ballpark. It may be 13 or maybe 15, but in that ballpark there, if 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now, the school district has a need of 15 acres, at that point in time, they're just frankly not going to find it in Westlake. And if they did find it, they would have to pay handsomely in order to gain something that we have right now. And that is one of the biggest things is not only is Westlake highly developed, but the large tracts and the large properties we would need in order to usefully do something with properties are going to be very hard to find in the future. So it gets into the next whereas. The district believes the value of Bassett and Holly Lane properties will continue to grow, allowing the properties to provide for the future needs of the district, and that those properties will hold or increase in value. And the retention of the Bassett and Holly Lane properties will allow for better diversification of the district assets and create additional recreational opportunities for students in the community. Now, therefore, be resolved by the Board of Education of the Westlake School District that number one, the board hereby determines to retain the former Bassett and Holly Lane school sites. 2, this board finds and determines that all formal actions of this board and of any of its committees concerning and relating to the adoption of this resolution were taken, and that all deliberations of this board and of any of its committees that resulted in such formal actions were held in meetings. And these are just kind of the legalities parts in there that David Riley put in for us there. But I guess what we're trying to do here is because as we take down these buildings, there is going to be that concern. There are going to be developers who show up and want the land. Then there's going to be property owners who are going to come to us and say, hey, can I buy this section or that section? Or if you cut out this track and do this and do that, we're not doing any of that. What we're doing is we are maintaining this property as an asset for the school district. And so that's really what this, and the goal of this is to formalize that a little bit. The last thing I'll mention, I had said that I was going to talk about this a bit, is we do have signs. We have some yard signs that we're going to put up, and we have large banners that we're going to put up kind of laying out our construction process and taking down that building on when playgrounds are going to be available, when they're not going to be available, and also emphasizing to the community there that we do plan on maintaining that property as a Westlake Schools property, which could be used for a school in the future, and it could be used as green space, and it could be used as athletic fields, if we choose to go that route as well. So we are planning, we do have designs that are in print and publication right now that we are going to post on that property so people can see it. And of course, passing this formal resolution as well. So at this point, we'll pause and take the board.
Discussion. Why don't we go for a motion on this in a second, and then we can open it up for discussion.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Okay, discussion?
I like the communication. I'll just say thank you for that. It's always very good for the district to communicate with all of our neighbors, and I certainly appreciate just being out there verbally, with visually, with signs, and communicating with all, just to be clear to all. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll also say, I think we kind of informally discussed this over many, many meetings, and this kind of puts it in print and kind of says, here's what the district outlook is for these other buildings. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Hopkins, roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
here not,
Yes,
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, any other board comments?
I have a couple of things, if I may, when it comes to security. I know that the district puts security at a very high level, and I just think about recent local news, in particular local news related to say hacking and money taken from Avon City Schools, I believe it's been. And if we can either take this time or another time just to discuss the security that we have in place with regard to that when it comes to funds. I also think about our recent ESSER's purchase with regard to technology. And again, not only the technology being stored at the Board of Education building, but security throughout. Whether it's now or at a future date, just to review the security that we have in place. Again, one for the dollars of our citizens, as well as the capital of our citizens.
So two things. I'll mention one thing, and then Todd can talk about specifically some items regarding the finances. We have upgraded doors, security systems at Hilliard. That was one of the items that we did improve upon. In regard to our cybersecurity, we did contract or in the process of contracting. Todd, is that contract done yet? Do you know?
I believe the contract is, and we're having the work done this summer.
Okay. Yeah, so we have, we did discuss this as part of our strategic plan in our technology section. It is a cybersecurity review that we're having an outside organization come in and check to see if we have areas of vulnerabilities or areas that we do need to improve. So that is already part of our strategic plan, and contract is signed, and we are moving forward with that. Now, just stating that, I know, I do know the story from the Avon schools, and I think that deals more with Todd's office, I believe. And if you want to mention anything about that, Todd.
Yeah, we do everything that we possibly can to protect the finances of the district, the public money that we hold. Some of those things are all of our banks that we utilize require multi-factor authentication. So it's not something that's just a normal, go in with just a generic password. We have token IDs or other forms of two-factor ID identification. We also have limits on what wire transfers can happen. We have authorization for wire transfers to where they have to have verbal confirmations for it at specific phone numbers. So we work with our banks to protect the district finances as much as possible. We're not using small, banks that might be a savings and loan or something of that nature. We work with three main banks that hold district finances. One of them is US Bank. They're a trust, hold money in trust for our investments. And that's run mostly through our investment firm, Red Tree Investments. We use Huntington Bank, and we use Dollar Bank. So all three of them are very, very large banks who obviously there's always risk in the world that we live in, but they work very diligently to minimize the risk as much as possible, and are often approaching me on ways that we can further minimize that risk and doing things differently. So I will never sit here and say to the board that, yeah, nothing could ever happen to us, because in the world that we live in, something always could, but we are very diligent to protect those in every way possible.
I believe when it comes to a hack or something along those lines, that Dr. Zagre has put some programs in place, just training all employees, including board members, with regard to being aware of cybersecurity, and that's greatly appreciated as well. And I know that you're involved with that. I believe in the new fiscal year, we'll have this conversation when it comes to refinancing debt. And I'm still as shocked, I think, as everyone that, rates, long-term rates are incredibly low. And every time we see a spike in rates, that somehow miraculously they come back down. So it's buying some time for us. But I know that we'll have that conversation in the new fiscal year as well.
We will. In fact, we've had ongoing conversations with our municipal advisor, Mike Sitsina. He emailed me last week, just before I had left, that we still have authorization for the 2 issues to refinance them. And there's potential to do a 3rd issue as well. So we would be targeting July 19th for board approval on the 3rd issue. We have a number of these issues that are become callable here in September. So as we finalize that board approval in July, we price it in August, and then we sell in September is our timing that we're looking at. So we're very much on top of that still.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say a couple of words as we end our fiscal year. It's been a challenging year, to say the least, with COVID and all the other things that have gone on. But I think as a district, we did really, really well. We've got a great staff. They were able to get up and change, and we appreciate everyone. It was challenging both from the parent side and everything else that we went through. But we're looking forward to starting the next year, hopefully with a new normal, right? We'll be back to the normal that we've been used to over the time. But, I think the good thing that comes out of this, any crisis, right, you always learn. And we've learned a lot. And I think the good parts of technology we'll be able to use going forward. So I think there's a lot of pluses that come out of this, even though there certainly was a lot of negatives and a lot of unfortunate illness and death. But, we always have to look at the positive, and we learn and we move forward. So I just wanted to say those words as we get ready to close out our fiscal year. Okay. Any other board comments?
Just a thank you to the WTA for once again putting out banners or signs for all the graduates this year throughout the city. It's great to drive around and see the signs, and especially the popularity of those signs is very nice. And I think it's the 3rd or 4th year that they've done it, and it's very much appreciated, I think, probably by the entire community, not just the parents.
Hear, hear.
Very good. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Hopkins.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Blazinski,
Yes.
Here not,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
You are adjourned.
Have a good Independence Day, everyone.